To this episode 88 of the Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. I am Anthony Ewing, and I'm joined by my team here, Grift and Rachel, as part of the Thought team. We'll do some intros here in just a moment, are joining us on this special episode where we are going to be dissecting future learning trends. And it's one of our favorite episodes of this show. We do it year over year. Where we pause, we take a step up and out, and we look into the future and understand how current and future trends are affecting us as learning professionals, us at large as organizations, and us as colleagues, as partners, as folks who support you all, as well as the way that you all are navigating your organization. So there should be a little bit of something for everybody here in this episode, but particularly those learning professionals out there who are tuning in. We want to welcome you all. We want to welcome our social community, both those folks who join us from LinkedIn, as well as Facebook and YouTube. We go live every Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock Central. And so today's episode, as I mentioned, is all about future learning trends. And in order to do that, we're going to be bringing in the 2022 LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report. And as I mentioned, perennially, this is a report that we look at to help us understand where we stand as a learning and development organization, how we're impacting the outcomes, the business, and the culture of our organizations, and what we can do to continue to sharpen our sword and meet the needs of our learners and our organizations at large. So with me today is my fearless colleague and counterpart, Grift Crenbury, VP of Learning and Development here at Thought. Grift, say hello.
Hello, everyone. I do have to also say, just that picture you just showed, immaculate headshots. A smart man once told me, never turn down a headshot. It's clear. If you learn anything, you're taking nothing else away from this episode.
The number one rule of headshots is never turn down a headshot. Yes, I think I was told that one too.
But good to be back. Excited to talk about this. Folks who have heard me blabber on any of these Navigating Nows in the past know that learning is a huge passion area of mine, something I just feel so privileged and honored that we get the chance to help our clients with on a day-to-day basis. So excited to be talking about this and excited to welcome my fearless colleague, Rachel, to the table. So Rachel, I'm going to pass the mic over to you and say hello.
Well, it's wonderful to be at the table with you all. Hi, everyone joining us live. My name is Rachel, and I work in the L&D space alongside with Grift and Anthony here. And I always love reading this workplace report because selfishly, one, it helps me get better. It helps us get better at our job. And two, I think there's learnings that we can take from L&D professionals, like Anthony said, and beyond. And I think that's one of the themes that we really pulled out here that I'm excited to dive into with you all.
Wonderful. Thank you both. And, as always, what we get so excited about is being at the forefront of these trends, but also being in the work. And so, that's really the spirit of the three of us joining. We work with organizations across industries in designing and developing great learning experiences, developing strategies that support today and tomorrow for our organizations. But what we love most is actually being in it. So, if one day we're developing a 3 to 5 year strategy for an L&D team, the next we're putting together, field guides for a workshop at a national sales meeting. And that's what makes this opportunity to pause and to look up and out really special for us. It's a little bit of the clouds and the dirt, if you will. And Griff gets to sit in between both of those today, literally and figuratively. So today we are unpacking the 2022 LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report. You can find it online. It is free to download. It is just a joy to read, a beautiful report that talks about trends, not just in L&D, but in talent development. And, every year there's a bit of a theme for learning and where learning is positioned, not just within our organizations, but within the industry and the world at large. And it seems as though the last few years, the responsibilities, the expectations, and the opportunities for learning have just been growing and growing and growing. And, the last 2 years, particularly 2021 and 2020, were really focused on L&D being a continuity conduit or a support as organizations figured out this new world, this new hybrid workplace. You talk about the great reshuffle and the makeup of the organizations really changing. The last few years were about L&D being in the center of all of that change. And if there was one maybe thesis that came out of this 2022 report, is that not only does L&D have a seat at the table, but learning is a top driver of not only business outcomes, but culture within organizations. And I think the three of us would agree that one of the most compelling statistics from this report showed that learning is a driver of culture more than any other component within what drives success within an organization. And you talk about, factors such as belonging and organizational values and collaboration. Learning is number one. And that is up from number 9 the last time that they benchmarked this. And so I'm curious as to, Rachel, as you think about the way that learning is positioned within organizations, how have you seen learning be a conduit or a part of driving culture within organizations?
Well, it really sets the tone for that kind of two-way street you engage with the organization, because not only are you contributing your skills and expertise that you bring to the table, but it's an ability for one way for the company to give back to you and see your growth, which was, I think, one of the major themes that came out, is how important learners and how demanding learners can rightfully be for how they're spending their time and what they expect to get from the organization.
Yeah, I love that. There was definitely a theme that came through in the 2022 LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report, and that was that our learners have more agency than they've ever had before. They have more flexibility and mobility in the way that they design their own careers. And we clearly are seeing corporate citizens in general take charge of their own direction and their own career, and that impacts the learning experience. So one of the first insights that we wanted to bring forward, we bring 3 key insights that really support learning as a driver of culture. And the report talks about how our learners' perspective is shifting quite drastically. And Griff, I know you've got such great experience in scaling the overall learning journey and the learning process for organizations. I know that that's always a lens that we love to help our organizations see, is like, how do we scale and create more buildability in what we're growing in terms of our learning culture. But how do you match that with now this almost like real desire for learners to have a customized experience? Like, how do you customize a scaled learning experience, and how do you speak to kind of the juxtaposition of those two?
Yeah, it seems a little paradoxical or counterintuitive just on the surface level. And I think you mentioned the term agency, which learners have agency, but I guess you would also just say people have kind of tapped into their own agency when they think about the careers they want, what they really want out of a job, what they really want out of a company that they join. And when you have a lot of agency, when you have a lot of choice that exists, I think you're going to find the organization that allows you to tap into not just what you want, but what you want to aspire to be. And what's really great about that is, as learning professionals, we are the people that we're not the only thing, but we can be one of the big drivers that help people build into the careers, the skills, the capabilities they want to have. But you mentioned the kind of an interesting moment. We're at an inflection point where we know our companies and the clients we work with, and frankly, companies at large are trying to deliver consistency of capability or skill within their workforce, but also give people the agency to build into the skills and capabilities that will make them differentiated, whether it's in their role now or in the role they want to build into in a company, or whether the role they want to have in 10, 15, 20 years. So there's a little bit of an interesting balance that we're having to strike. And I think a couple of things that come to mind for us of how we take advantage of that. One is get super clear on what you would call the consistent foundation of the skills you want out of your individuals. Now, we know that there needs to be personalization in those, but find the 4 or 5 things that you really think should be ever present in every role, in every person, no matter the level of the organization. And obviously you can tailor across different levels, but get really clear on what those foundational expectations and capabilities are. So you do that, and you kind of build this scaled approach to what great can look like. At the same time, what we know is that people are looking for ways to make those learning experiences their own. And there are a number of different tools and frankly, a number of different ways that we can build and work with our clients, and we think our clients should work on their own to make sure that people have that last mile ownership, if you will, of making the learning real. A couple of examples of this. How much time are you actually spending thinking about not just the workshop you're designing, but how people will then take and use those things back on the job? Do you actually spend as much time designing that last mile execution for your people? Or are you just focused on creating a dazzling workshop? Now, I know all of us as experienced designers, we love dazzling workshops as much as anybody. At the same time, I think what we're finding is we're putting much more effort into the pre and the post of any kind of live experience to make sure people feel like they're able to apply it. And that comes a little bit back to the personalization. The other thing too is people are looking for just-in-time support. And so there are a number of platforms, there are a number of things that you can tap into that give your people those, as much as we want to be proactive in learning, there is the reactive nature of being in a company, right? Something pops up, something you need to be showing or exhibiting a certain capability or skill in the moment. And oftentimes we're just relying on them to call back on what they've learned. Now, with these applications and with these experiments we really want to focus on, that'll give them the chance to feel confident in those moments. But can you also invest in platforms, tools, additional things to make people feel like they have support in those just-in-time moments? And so I think a couple of those things allow us both to say, what's the consistency, what's the scale that we want to build towards, and also how do we give people an experience that's going to help them build into the leader they want to be?
Yeah, I love that. Any particular tools that you've seen out in the marketplace that really help provide that just-in-time training, which I know is easy to do with small populations, a little bit harder to do with larger populations?
Yeah, there's different levels of fidelity, right? Like there are things as easy that you can do in terms of giving people a PDF that has a certain list of experiments that they should be expecting back on the job. So when it comes to this particular behavior or capability, here are some common scenarios you're probably going to face it in. It's something as simple as that, all the way up to, we even work with a couple of partners in the space of one-on-one unlimited coaching platforms. So you give people the chance to say, hey, I have a really important feedback conversation coming up. I remember this great feedback model that I took a workshop on about 2 weeks ago, but I can't really remember exactly how to put it into use. What if I could maybe talk to someone for 15 minutes on putting that to use? There are platforms that exist out there that can give people that real-time human support, not just so you have certain different levels of fidelity you can play at depending on your scope and need.
Yeah, the challenge of scaling the unscalable is something that I think we'll always be faced with, but technology has definitely helped us reach more people. But it's not just about technology. So I love that you're presenting a little bit of some of the lower fidelity and higher tech forward type solutions to scale the learning experience. Rachel, along the lines of this insight of our learners' perspectives shifting, the LinkedIn Learning Report talks about how L&D and HR and talent development must take a more holistic approach at developing our learners. And we've been talking a lot about how the new required skills of today's professional are shifting. And the learners are expecting to be developed in ways that are outside of functional and technical training. So we're more learning now than we ever have been before. What are some of the ways that you've seen these new required skills come into play, and how can L&D professionals think about supporting these new skills?
So I just want to reiterate what you said about something being so important, is that the learners aren't just looking for skills that are going to make them better at the current job that they have. Their goal for learning is beyond their current role. It's where do they want to go with their career? It's how do they want to grow personally as well? And so it requires us to kind of take one step up and looking at those soft transferable skills that can show up in a number of different roles. So a few big ones that I've seen be popular these past few months. One is situational intelligence and being able to read the room, if you will, and react well to whatever situation you're put in. The agility to respond to those situations, and also things like storytelling. I don't think I can emphasize enough how important that skill is, whether it's with some of our commercial teams that we work with and they're selling and telling a story alongside of that, or different internal roles across almost every business. You see storytelling being one of those skills. And Grift, what you said earlier about designing a dazzling experience really resonated with me. It made me think of a quote. Are either of you two School of Rock fans?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I can be, yes.
Okay.
For the moment.
In the movie School of Rock, Jack Black has this quote that's one great rock show can change the world. And I think as L&D professionals, we like to think one great L&D experience is going to change the world, one 60 or 90-minute workshop. But humbly, that's not always the case. So we need to think about these learning progressions. We need to think how to better embed learning on the job. That 70% of time people are just on the job working. How do we set them up with mentorships, with shadowing, with job rotations. I think that's a big miss in the L&D space right now. And that focus on giving people experiences, even within the same company, helps with that retention, that internal mobility for people to grow and shift within the organization, and will keep people around a lot longer and building new skills.
Yeah, some great points. One workshop can't change the world, but have you seen my Star Wars themed workshop where the facilitator is dressed as Chewbacca? Like, world changing.
I don't know if I want my world changed that way. I'm not sure about that one.
World changing. I probably just need to watch School of Rock. Yeah. Just some great points about these new required skills, and I'll just add on. We're starting to see this taste for real skills like agility and influence and resilience come into play. Is that organizations are no longer seeing this type of EQ, situational intelligence, as bolt-on training. They're seeing it as almost the foundation to things like a selling process, to things like technical business acumen. And so these new required skills are almost being prioritized, and we're working with organizations to not just embed storytelling into the selling process, but challenging them to make storytelling and empathy and situational intelligence the starting point for how to reach and interact and influence your customers. And that shows not only an investment in, again, the skills needed to be successful, particularly for field-based folks, but also it shows a unique investment in the individual, a universal skill that, to your point, can be taken throughout the organization or in any role in their future, which is really, really exciting to see. Okay, let's move on to the second insight. We're here unpacking the 2022 LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report. We're talking about future trends at a point where L&D has more of an impact on culture than it ever has been before. The report itself talks about how L&D is becoming central and strategic and collaborative, but also overworked. And we're going to touch on that in a moment. But that point I think is so well taken because our skill set as L&D professionals has gotten so much more wide than it ever has been before. And we as L&D professionals really do need to understand the business more than we ever have. And one of the things that we talked about internally is not just us as trainers and L&D professionals and HR specialists, but also our audience, the learners, the folks that are out there, singing the praises of the organization, selling products, making the organization run every day. They need to understand the business more than ever because the business is changing almost on a day-to-day basis. And so, Griff, I'd love to just hear your perspective on, how our learners and then ultimately how our trainers can better get closer to the business to increase our impact, and how's that impacting the way that we design training today?
Yeah, and maybe even just starting at why business acumen is such a differentiator.
Sure.
I don't think business acumen as a skill set is something that is new. I think learning and development professionals, folks who run learning for companies, understand that, and they can see that the people who then tend to progress in an organization are folks who have a really innate focus or a razor sharp focus on learning the business, learning how different parts of the business operate together, understanding metrics, understanding the strategy of the organization, right? And there's so much power in understanding where your organization is headed and then being able to see yourself in it. And so part of this is just understanding, again, business acumen has always been important. I think what has been exacerbated or accelerated is the fact, again, as we look at the broader trends and there's less, let's call it connective nodes that you have to an organization, one of the things that becomes extremely hypercritical is understanding where the organization is headed. And doing that requires a certain level of business plus financial acumen that people are going to need. So there's a couple of things at play here. One is people need it to advance in their careers because as they get more and more senior, they're going to have to be able to interact with people across the aisle. They're going to have to be able to understand and develop more strategic plans that require understanding the direction of the organization. So that's part of it. The other part of it too is it's a huge retention mechanism. People need to understand where they're headed so they can see that, they can feel themselves in it, they can see they're part of the growth, and so they get really excited. So as learning and development professionals, we know engagement and retention are huge things that we worry about. Business acumen is one of those baseline I don't want to say it's a new required skill, but absolutely a focus that we have to have. Give people a chance to really get close to the strategy, close to the business, so that they get really excited about where we're headed. So all of that to say, that's maybe a little bit of a setting of the stage of how then do we build things that are really focused on business acumen. So I think one big thing that we tend to always bring to our clients is how can you take whatever framework, behavior, skill, anything you're really focused on, and put it in the context for the individual to really put it into application. I think oftentimes we tend to stop maybe at the behavior, or we tend to stop at saying, here's a good framework for you to use back on the job, but then we don't give them the business situation, the business scenario that it will come to life in. And so that's where they're going to build a lot of the business acumen, right? We'll be able to teach them a few things, or maybe they'll understand a few things leaving a session or being part of a micro learning or going through something self-paced online, but it's really going to be ingrained when they're experiencing it back on the job. So you give them those extremely focused scenarios that are going to matter most to them. I think another thing too that is not done early enough at organizations is like get people really involved with the metrics. What are the metrics your organization cares about? How do they move? What are the things that affect and focus them? How do the different parts of the business affect those metrics? How can we be better at our jobs, more efficient, and then drive those metrics? So I think again, part of it is give people the context, see how they can actually use these things in the business scenarios that matter to build that business acumen and the financial acumen, and then actually give them a chance to say, like, what are the things that we measure and how do we measure them and how are we going to drive them?
As quickly as things have been changing within organizations, we're seeing, just this increase in transparency from the top. And that is requiring our training to reflect and to support our learners' ability to understand that transparency and understand how it impacts their role and the broader organization. Rachel, how have we seen L&D professionals step in a little bit closer to the business so that we are designing and delivering appropriately?
So the story of L&D professionals being order takers versus business partners isn't a new one. And I know over the years, especially recently, there's this feeling that L&D has been brought to the table more and is getting in that more partnership space. Now, realistically, I see this across the spectrum with different clients that we work with. And I think a few skills that L&D professionals could build to better our seat at the table is one, starting with that business acumen that Griff talked about. We can't be leading initiatives and leading trainings on this if we don't have those skills ourselves. So we really need to understand where the business is going, what are the major objectives and initiatives of the business, so we can translate that into learning experiences, assets, tools to execute that actually. Secondly, I would say just the ability to gain trust with different business leaders at the table. You need to be able to show up. You need to be able to listen. Something as simple as listening to what some of their day-to-day challenges are, listening to what some of their goals are, and then being able to deliver and help assist them in reaching their goals is a really powerful way to build that relationship. So with that also comes measuring our learning, right? So you need to be intentional about the impact that you're expecting to drive, and really start with the end in mind of what objective of behavior that we're trying to drive, and then how am I going to demonstrate that this learning is in service of that? And step by step is when we will get that true business partnership with those people around the table.
Yeah, the game has changed for sure, not just for our learners, but for the expectations of our learning professionals. And I think that brings us, it's a really nice transition to, our third insight. I think one of, we started with the thesis of the 2022 LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report, and that was that, L&D now is at the center of huge impact on organizations, not just on outcomes and direction, but also on culture. So if last year was L&D's moment, this report says that in 2022, this is L&D's oh shit moment. Because all of this that we've talked about.
We'll edit that out in post.
We definitely can. All of this that we've talked about, the need to understand and develop new required skills, the increased agency that our learners have and expectations for authentic and personalized learning experiences, our need to get closer to the business and drive those outcomes in our learners. This is all incremental, right, to what a lot of us know as classic trainers, which is I put together training and deliver great training and work on my facilitation skills. And in many cases, I kind of take orders from above. We've got to play so many roles now. And so the report talks about, L&D's opportunity to really extend its reach. How do we take on this responsibility and call on different corners of the organization that we not only need to collaborate with, but we need to drive some of these new skills and outcomes. So you talk about our partnership with managers, extending the learning experience beyond training. You talk about partnership with HR as we start to bring in more of the supporting skills of the total employee. You talk about the partnership with subject matter experts and peers. These are all unique partnerships that maybe we've called on in the past, but we need today. And so Griff, tell us a little bit about how L&D can extend its reach within organizations to increase our efficacy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, relating back a little bit to what Rachel just shared, which I think was very well said, by the way, extending the reach, you can see it one of two ways. And I think this is a little bit of a mindset shift that some folks might need. You can see it as a burden that you're sitting at all these different moving parts and man, it just feels really hard to manage all of this. Or you can see it as an ultimate opportunity. We get to almost play the conductor seat of the symphony of the organizations that we sit in. And if you see it that way, you can really start to say, and you can start to picture, what are all these different other groups who are around the learning experience? And how can we maximize everything that they do to make someone, the individual, again, we talk about scaled plus personalized learning. How can we extend that to make everyone kind of singing, I guess, playing the same tune? They don't sing in symphonies, right? They play music, playing all the same music so that when an individual is having that experience, it all feels so seamless. It feels like it's progressive. It feels like it's building on itself. And you get someone who's building skills, recognizing that they love the company that they work for and all the different people who are helping them out along the way. So part of this is a little bit of a mindset shift. We have to see this as an opportunity, not so much as a burden that we sit at the, in the middle of all these extended arms. I think managers are huge. Managers are such a big potential enabler of what a learning culture is at any organization, small or large. You need that manager to really buy in, as one of their biggest and most integral roles of being a manager is their people's learning experience. And if they're not bought into themselves as a key stakeholder or one of the big steerers, if you will, of that, you're not going to have a great learning culture. It's just not going to happen. The person who that individual was probably working with the most, if not the most, one of the most frequent amounts of time, they're not bought into it. That person's not going to feel bought into it. So I think getting the managers super involved is extremely important. I'm going to pass it over to Rachel because I definitely want to hear her thoughts on this too. But one other thing I always get a little to getting. Oh, Griff has another comment. One other thing that I think, as you just think of even about building and designing learning experiences and progressions is develop more ways to add social learning into the experiences you build. So you're not just extending the reach by, managers and HR and subject matter expertise, but you're also extending the way people learn. Give them the chance to talk with other managers or other salespeople or people who are going through similar situations, but maybe in a different context. You build that diversity of perspective into your learning experience, and then you have a culture of learning that's not just about skill building, but it's about diversity of perspective building. And that can be so powerful as you think about people really becoming holistic leaders in a business. Now I'll pass it over.
Yeah, because Rachel, I know you've got some real experience in the power of, kind of peer cohorts, peer coaching, even bringing SMEs in creative ways. What have you seen out there? Yeah,
so starting with peer coaching, I always find those sessions to be the most energizing and invigorating ones that we can host because, for example, in our Learning Accelerator we did a few months ago, putting so many L&D professionals in one space, getting to solve each other's problems and hear about the challenges that others are facing, it just sparks so much learning and opportunity and creativity that L&D professionals often operating by themselves or with just a few other folks wouldn't otherwise normally think to get. So being able to just gather a bunch of like-minded individuals in that instance was really helpful. I would say with our client work, we also had a really successful experience where we brought together cross-functional colleagues to work together to solve some of the company's biggest problems and opportunities that they saw for the next 4 or 5 years. And the energy in the room for that time, and we were in person for this, was just incredible because you had people who were bringing all different perspectives to the table, people who were interacting with parts of the business they hadn't ever interacted with before and learning from them to actually apply it to something tangible, to something that's going to help the company in the future, to something that the leaders committed to embedding in their planning for the rest of the year and next year. And so I found that ability to get a bunch of different types of people in the room working together was just something really powerful that took learning to the next level and immediately showed that value back to the business. And one more plug for SME-led learning as well, having those subject matter experts or some of those stars in the company, getting them out in front of the rest of the organization is something that I've seen learners just really grasp onto. You have someone who demonstrates a really good skill, if we go back to storytelling, and being able to watch them practice their craft and kind of pick out what it is they're doing really well and putting on that masterclass for the people around them. That credibility is already there for the learners because they know how well this person does their job and how useful this can be for them back on the job. And so some of those sessions I also see being the ones that are most well liked, but also the ones that are most applied back on the job, that people feel like I can really take what this is and it's going to make me better at what I do today and make me better into the future, no matter what that might be.
Yeah, as our scope increases as learning and development teams and professionals, so does our need or necessity to bring other people in to support our efforts. And so it's almost as if we're starting to see organizations treat L&D as a center of excellence, and with that comes a responsibility to pull resources in that can support our efforts. The ask is pretty high. We have definitely a seat at the table, but truly our ability to partner, to bring folks in, to have those strong relationships and to get creative about how we leverage social learning in ways to kind of extend that experience. It's more important today than it ever has been. And I appreciate some of the specificity with which you both are able to share. I mean, it's just so great to be in the trenches and to see some of this stuff in action and see our clients really grapple with a lot of the same challenges and opportunities across different industries. And that's, all of that is really a part of why we pause the way that we do. And we take a look at these trends and we say, what can we do to support these trends? What can we do to continue to push and to thrive in environments that are changing, almost constantly? We'll round things out with another, I think, very surprising stat that came from the LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report. Every year, they take a look at how much time we as learning professionals are reinvesting in ourselves and growing ourselves. And I think this year, more than ever, that number went down significantly. I believe that it was we spend 23% less time on our own development because we're pouring into the organizations and pouring into some of these new responsibilities. So, and this could be for either Grift or Rachel. What are some of the ways that we can kind of pause and reinvest in ourselves so that we are equipped to handle a lot of this opportunity that's in front of us?
You want to start?
Go ahead, I know you.
She knows me too well. I think there's a number of ways, but maybe I'll try to keep it pretty targeted. If I were to just give people maybe one or two, I would say one thing that I find to be a differentiator for folks who are tasked with driving learning in their organizations is like, you're gonna love this analogy. Are you spending time when you're cooking a soup for your organization to taste the recipe first? And what I mean by that is, are you as an L&D professional, are you going through and experiencing in full on engagement the experiences that your people are going through? And so not only will you get great feedback and you'll get a good experiential lens of how that gets delivered, but undoubtedly there are going to be skills, capabilities, behaviors that are ingrained in those experiences that we're trying to drive that you should be grabbing onto. We talk about business acumen, we talk about storytelling. These are all things that we all need to be really great in our careers. And so I think sometimes we think we're just the stewards of learning. We have to be like learners ourselves a lot. And so part of it is like tap into what you're building and be part of it and try to be a little bit more of an immersive part of it. So I think that's one. The second thing that I come back to is spend time getting to know your business. Spend time really getting to know your business. And that kind of comes in two big ways. really get to understand the strategy and the metrics that your organizations care about. And then ladder whatever we're working on in the learning space back to those objectives, make sure there's clear ties to ensure that happens, and then get to know the leaders of the business. We talk about this as an opportunity we have to be in that center, conducting as the lead of the symphony, spend the time to make those relationships, understand what they all care about, and you create this amazing amount of music for learning in your organization.
Yeah, I love that. Rachel, anything to add?
I'm just picturing us conducting with one arm, eating soup with the other. It's a lot to ask.
Convergence of the analogy.
Soup eating conductors. That's what we're looking at.
But what I heard out of all of that you said, Grift, is just this curiosity over complacency. So I think we all love what we do, or we got into this job for a reason, and it's because many of us have this inner curiosity that we just want to share with the people in our workplace and the people that are around us. So I always find it helpful to reground myself in what's interesting, what newsletters am I subscribing to, what am I checking to spur new creative thinking, and get outside of my own little box, try to talk to as many new people with different experiences and just hear what's going on in their world, what's working with them, what's getting them excited, and thinking about different ways that we can incorporate that into the learning experience and just the overall work experience that we're helping to cultivate with the employees within our organization.
Yeah, great points, both of you. We call this practitionership. This is a term that we love here at Thoughtium. That is treating your work like an art form or a craft or even a symphony, if you will. But now more than ever, I mean, there's just so much we can dive into. And it's so interesting because I think about, my days as a trainer in the pharmaceutical industry, back in the day. And training was so specialized, and it was focused on clinical knowledge and product training and maybe some territory management and some selling skills. And you almost treated it in those verticals, in those silos. And the way that organizations would almost specialize their teams is they would break their teams up in those silos. And it couldn't be more the inverse today, where we not only have to be jack of all trades, we have to understand how to go deeper with our own skill sets, how to call on different parts of the organization, and how to be the experts in front of the room and not just, kind of a one-trick pony, if you will. And that's such a great challenge for us to deepen our practitionership and to do that with vigor and to do that with enjoyment, as there's just so much coming our way. And, hopefully for those of us who have tuned in today, we've inspired a little bit of new thinking for you. Maybe we've given a couple of best practices or nuggets. We definitely encourage everybody to take a look at the 2022 LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report. It's the anchor of kind of this season where we kind of pause and take a look at what's happening and really challenge ourselves to deepen our practitionership in designing and delivering great learning experiences. Do you both have time for a quick lightning round?
Of course.
Surprise lightning round? Okay, cool. So we'll do a quick lightning round, and maybe this gives you all an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the Thoughtium team. And this is a question for both. What are you reading, watching, or studying at the moment? Go ahead.
I'm not proud of it, but I'm watching a lot of Survivor content. And let's see, there is a lot to be learned from it, if you will. So just understanding the dynamics, the social dynamics that go into the game, the strategy, following that up with some post-session learning with deep dives on Reddit.
It's a whole progression.
There's a whole learning progression associated with the Survivor content. So while that's not the most academic thing
I love that
right now.
Now, are you like OG, like season 1, or like where did you start?
I started, it was a passion that started at the beginning of the pandemic because it was the only live sports, is what we called it in my household. When everything else was shut down, there's a new season of Survivor, I believe it's season 40, that would be regularly aired every week. So that was the time for us to gather around the television and watch sports.
I love that. Live sports, I love that. Griff, what are you consuming at scale?
Oh man. All right. So I'm very into hockey. I'm watching the NHL playoffs right now. So any hockey fans out there, I'm a big Toronto Maple Leafs fan. Anyone knows about the curse of the Maple Leafs, I'll tell you all about it. Maybe another navigating now. So I'll do a whole one. Watching the playoffs. I'm reading back into a couple books that I found very profound a couple years ago, and I've kind of lost touch with them. Social Physics and Deep Work.
Just some light reading.
Well, social physics is just, I think it's a book that, although it was written a while ago, it's such a callback to we as human beings, how we learn, how we retain, how we get the best idea out of ourselves. And it really comes down to how often are we increasing the diversity of the ways we interact, the way we innovate, et cetera. So social physics, big time plug for it. And then deep work. Deep work is probably the hardest thing to find, I think, in the kind of the post-pandemic world of how do you actually carve out really meaningful blocks of your day to get very meaningful things done. Something that I'm always on the strive for. Haven't found it yet, but if I keep reading it, maybe I'll read it 2 more times, I'll find those blocks for myself.
I love that. Griff, we'll stay with you. Will you sleep on the plane or do work on the plane on your way home?
I think
no right answer, no wrong answer.
I will probably get on the plane so excited for multiple hours of work, and I'll probably do about an hour of work, and then I'll either turn on one of the airline movies or I'll start sleeping. So a lot of ambitions, but the reality will be like an hour of work.
Okay,
3 hours.
Rachel, do you sleep or work on planes?
Both. There's room for both, especially as we've been picking up a little bit more client travel. We've been heading out to the West Coast a bit more from Chicago. So if you get that 3 or 4 hour plane ride, I don't think you need to choose. You can have both.
I love it. Okay. This is maybe a question for either or both. If learning and development were a guest at a cocktail party and he or she had a couple of drinks, what would learning and development say at a cocktail party?
Go ahead.
I think they would just have a lot of fun facts up their sleeve. They'd be the person that had maybe a really specialized niche of content that they were just super passionate about, super excited to tell everyone about, and definitely have 1 or 2 stories that they would want to regale and hold court over the party with.
Love that.
Can I answer as well?
Yes, please.
I think everyone would walk away with a really clear sense of their core values and maybe even a leadership brand statement.
Okay, cool. A very productive cocktail party, if you will. I love that. I love that. Okay, maybe last question I want to ask both of you. Rachel, think about one thing that you admire about yourself and finish this statement. The world would be a better place if it were
more conscientiousness. Conscientious. I rank high on conscientiousness, and I believe it's been a quality that has helped me be thoughtful in how I approach my personal life, how I approach my professional life, with the diligence I approach it, and the thoughtfulness with which I try to bring to every conversation. So I think it would help with some intentionality in the world as well.
I love that. Griff, the world would be a better place if it were.
I feel a little bad because she had to go first and didn't get any time to prep. So I had a little bit of time. So the world would be a better place if it were more consistently curious as it relates to people, problems, and politics.
And that is a leadership statement for you right there. So conscientious and curious, the 2 C's here to round the show out. Griff and Rachel, thank you so much for being a part of not only episode 88, but the broader discussion that we hope everybody that is tuning in will take part in. And whether that's downloading the report, taking this episode to your teams and having some energized, fruitful discussion. There is so much going on in the talent development and learning development space. We are so proud and humbled and honored to be at the center of this discussion and also to be in the work with you all. We love to lift up and look up and out, much like we did today. We do that every Thursday at 3:00 Central. You can find us at thoughtteam.com/live. We want to thank everybody tuning in today. And for those folks that we've sent this to and said, hey, we hope you get something out of it, we hope you absolutely did. We'd love to hear your feedback. What do you want to hear more of? What do you want to go deeper on? We covered a lot of space today, and we just feel such an opportunity and a responsibility to have this discussion with you all, and we just appreciate you all stepping in. So thank you all so much for joining. We'll see you next Thursday at 3:00 Central.